John here, guys, and today we are finally talking about the Campfire Quads CF1. Now, I have here both the CF1X and the CF1 Stretched X. So, let's take a quick look before we really get started on going through everything and tell the difference in the angle of these two. So here's the Stretch X, which is very stretchy indeed. I love this. And here's the True X, which is really very X-like. I mean, this really is a true X. Now, I've flown both of these configurations, and my personal preference is I like the Stretch X. Now, it really just comes down to, there's no right or wrong or better or worse. It really comes down to what you're used to. So, before we keep going, I really wanted to compare the X's to a very popular frame that's out right now, which is the Floss 2.1. So, if we compare how much of an X that is, you can very easily see that the Campfire Quads is much more of an X. I don't know if you can tell right there. So it's several degrees on either side, more of an X right there. And so now this is the Floss 2.1 5-inch. Let's pull out the 6-inch. Now this is the 6-inch Floss 2 in the back, and you can tell that that is way more of a stretch. Now, when the Floss moved over to the 2.1 boomerang arms, they actually gained some stretch there. So let's compare these two, and it's still stretchier. So if you prefer a stretched X, this is the stretchiest of the X's, which I actually really like. And the characteristics that you feel differently when flying is that you'll have a little bit more precision on your pitch axis. So as you're kind of flying along, when you're trying to get that pitch just right, it becomes better at keeping the nose down and giving you a little bit more resolution in that. And what you end up losing is a little bit of yaw. But if you can see my camera in there, I fly with a fairly high camera tilt, as you can see right there. And now, so I really don't use a ton of yaw. When I turn, I mostly turn with roll. And so as I'm flying, this is about level, if you can see that right there. So it's a fairly high tilt. This pod allows you to go up to a 60-degree tilt, and I personally have been flying with a bit higher than that. I kind of prefer now closer to a 65-degree tilt. Sometimes I'll even go as high as about 70. But one thing that's very interesting about this camera placement in this is that the camera is a little bit closer to the center, and it's a little bit higher than on your standard camera mount on like on something than the Floss. So now the other thing that I do is I actually run the Foxeer Micro Aero Pro, which has a slightly smaller lens. That actually allows me to get a couple of extra camera degrees in there because I can tilt the lens up a little further. So right now I actually have it about 60 degrees, but I could get maybe 62, 63 degrees in there, which, you know, when it's level is about like that. Which is you know, this actually it's really not very easy to see. This is a better angle. This is level and how I'm flying. If you look at horizontal, so this would be 90. I'm down at about 65, which I like that. But the resultant camera angle, I feel, even though it's technically 65 in the pod, the same angle that your quad ends up being, I feel like is a little closer to 70 degrees, which is kind of what I like as I mentioned. So let's talk about some of the features of this. One of the things that I really like is that I'm going to go ahead and remove the pod here. I've already taken the screws out. And when you remove your pod, the only two things that you have to do if you need to provide some service is remove your camera connector and your antenna connector. Now I use MMCX now, so this is very easy. Boom, now I have the pod separate from the rest of the frame, just like that. Now, very quickly, this is the kind of stack that you have to maintain when you fly this. Now, I kind of went over this a little bit in my stack video that I just made. So I would use the Hyperlight F4 OSD flight controller, the Acon AK32 35 amp BL Heli 32 ESC 4-in-1 with the power leads out to the back. Have my capacitor down here. This is the one that comes with the Acon. I'm using the AKK FX3 VTX, and I just have that double-sided tape down to the flat side of this flight controller. And then my XM Plus is actually right in here between my ESC and my flight controller. So I use a little bit higher of a standoff than normal, just so I can fit that all in the same stack. And so then this is just my wire harness for my VTX here. This makes it really easy if I ever needed to swap a VTX, just boom. And then my camera goes out to the front like that. So I am using the True RC version of the Axie right here with MMCX. Normally I prefer to use the Lumineer Axie on most of my quads. That's what I use on all of my flosses. But this particular pod played a little bit nicer with the True RC. From what I understand, the True RC is like a 1 or 1.5 millimeter smaller. And so since it was designed for that, some people were having issues fitting the Axie in there. Now, one of the cool things about Campfire Quads is they really pay attention to the trends that are going on, and they listen to the community. And so they found, and they did a poll, they found that more people tend to use the Lumineer version of the Axie. And I do too. I find that it's just a little bit more durable. I've actually never broken a True RC version, but as you can see, if you try to kind of slide that in there, it's just a little bit too big. Now, what Chris will tell you and Brian is that if you soak this in water, boil the pod, it'll become a little bit more pliable, and then it should fit in no problem. But a few people were having issues, so they've modified it to fit this one versus that one. So then you can actually run both fairly easily, because all you would need to do is either, like I do, apply a little bit of conformal coating right here to kind of seal this in there so it doesn't ever pop out, or just kind of do like a 3D printed sleeve. Another thing that were looking at for a while is they had another material 3D printed canopy, which I'm going to change my ISO right there so you can actually see it, and it's sort of translucent, it's a little bit clear. And I saw a couple of these in the field and they looked awesome, because you can actually kind of, let me see if I can slide this over sort of real quick. You can see some of the components inside. You can see some of the lights when they light up on the flight controller and the receiver and whatnot, and it looks just really, really cool. But they said this may not be ready for prime time. They are testing this. They didn't release this. They didn't show any pictures on the website. So they may release a small batch of these if anybody's interested. I personally love the way that it looks, but it just shows that they're innovating, they're trying new things, but they're only releasing the highest quality of products out to people. And I really, really appreciate that fact. They're testing new stuff, but they're not just throwing it out there. They're using it themselves for many, many weeks before they release this. So I was able to get my hands on one of these. I think I'm not sure if I'll actually fly it, but I love how it looks. It's so cool. I don't know if it's going to have the same crash integrity as the other pod, but yeah, I think I might try it. I can't tell. I may dye it. It does, whenever it's dyed, it doesn't take on a super blue like the other pod that you see back there, but it does looks sort of like a translucent blue, which I really, really like. So if I can get this thing off, put these back in frame. And so the build goes together very, very nicely. If you want to see more details on the build, just look at the videos that they have on the Campfire website. I'm not going to go through the builds 100%. JJ Rotogeek also has some really cool build videos on these, so I'm just not going to cover the same stuff. The frame does come with 5 arms. I love that it comes with a 5th arm. Now at $60, this is kind of a middle to low price range frame. But when you take into account that you do get that extra arm, you start to see the value there. So no, it's not quite as low priced as, say, a Floss or a Mode 2 Ghost, but those things don't come with the extra arms. Now, this does have like a sandwich plate designed. So there's press nuts in here, and there are 2 plates, and then the arms kind of sandwich in there. Now, one thing that I really, really like, now let's do this on camera. This is not scripted. I'm moving the arms here. I'm trying to move the arms, and they're just not budging. Look at this. They are not budging at all. They are solid. So anyone that used to run the older version of the Floss, before the 2.1 boomerang arms came out, know that it was a constant struggle of having to always tighten up your arms. Now, I do actually have a Floss 2 arms in the back of this, so I'm just gonna, I didn't tighten these beforehand, I'm just gonna see. Oh, you see that? You see that? You see that? Look how much movement you have in this. And that's why when the boomerang arms came out, it solved that issue. But what happened to the price point? Originally, you could get 5 Floss arms for $12. Or $13 or so. But now, one boomerang arm on the Floss costs $12. So, whoa, you break an arm and you're out $12. Campfire Quads sells arms $12 for a pack of 4, which is really nice. So you have the rigidity that you want from a boomerang arm in a single arm, and you can keep that price point low and keep yourself flying. And I really, really think that's cool. So if you factor that in, this is really a great affordable quad to fly. Now, let's talk about the durability of this pod. Now, believe it or not, I have flown this setup about 70 to 80 packs because I really wanted to test the durability of this. This is actually the first podded 5-inch that I've ever owned, and I was always a little skeptical about how these would hold up in crashes, but this nylon material is amazing. Now, this is actually the standard cut that's here. Now, I got this from a local guy, Scott, who I think had mounted up and tried it, and he actually cut this side a little bit higher to be able to access his USB port, but that's not how it comes. It comes like this. And the only weak point that I have seen is you can see a little bit of movement there, but I think that may just be a print line in the 3D print. I don't think it's a symptom of the actual pod cracking, and it's caused no issues. Now, because this is more of a stretch than I'm used to, I have had multiple, and I mean multiple hard crashes. I'm talking about in the standard track that I fly, there's a very tall split S maneuver that we generally build into a lot of our tracks because there's just 2 trees that are kind of right next to each other. And so to get over the top of those, it's about 25 to 30 feet high. And so doing that split S maneuver with this formation, the first few times, it didn't quite move in the pitch direction the same way that I was used to. And so I clipped the very top of that tree and fell 30 feet to the ground with no issues. Similarly, as I was adjusting to this, and generally I'm starting to break more things in general just because I fly faster and faster now. So I break more props, more arms in general, stuff like that. And this thing has held up to full speed hits directly into a tree. Now, my full speed hit is probably 45 to 55 miles an hour. When I see Yvonne take a full speed hit at 75 to 80 miles an hour, okay, that may actually break something. But for me, this has held up no problem. And as you can see, it offers very nice camera protection. The camera is well below the edge of this pod, which is nice. So you will not hit that camera. What else can I say about this thing, guys? I love the stretchiness of this X. I love that there is a built-in place for you to be able to fit your battery strap in here. And most of all, I absolutely love the packaging that this thing comes in. And I would be remiss if I made this video without mentioning what I consider to be the best and most thoughtful and creative packaging that I have seen in this hobby to date. Whoever decided to come up with this touch is just simply genius. I mean, it feels like you're buying something on Etsy. This is something that you can show to like your wife or your girlfriend or whatever significant other and say, look at this. You can show it to your mom. I mean, it's just so cool. And I really tried to keep this in its original condition because I just love how it looks. It's really awesome. So Brian, Chris, whoever came up with this, you guys are just killing it. I love this packaging. Don't ever stop doing this. And so, like I said, it does come with the extra arm. It comes with the awesome packaging. And, you know, I bought this from these guys in person. Of course, you can always order it from them as well. And so one of the things I was like, oh, I hope I get that cool packaging that I've seen on the videos. And yes, you will get it. It's awesome. What else? If you want to build up multiple of these, it's really nice that you can have these pods ready to go just like this, with your antennas mounted up here, your camera mounted in here. You could have left hand and right hand polarized versions of the antennas. So if you ever needed to switch, you can just switch out your pod. And these pods are cheap. They're like $17 or $18 each. Oh man. I mean, I love that they cost so little. I love that the arms are so affordable. I just bought a couple extra sets of the Stretch X arms because I think that's the configuration that I'm going to go with. And one other thing that is really awesome is that you can try whichever version of this frame that you want to try. And if you want to switch from Stretch X to True X or vice versa, you do not have to buy an additional frame. That's right, fellas. You don't have to buy another frame. All you have to do is buy those arms that you need. So I can switch this. In fact, actually, when I originally had this, it was a True X. I switched it over to a Stretch X just by getting some Stretch X arms. And now that I have this True X frame, if I ultimately decide that what I want my Campfire Quads CF1s to be is the Stretch X version, all I have to do is buy $12 worth of arms and boom, I have a Stretch X. I will also say that because of the way these arms go in, so when you're replacing an arm, all you have to do is go right here, undo this screw from the bottom, and then just loosen this screw right here, which is on the stack. You don't have to take it all the way out, just loosen a little bit, and it pops right out like magic. The arm swap on this frame is the easiest that I've ever done. I know floss arms are not, particularly hard to do. The boomerang arms made it actually a little bit easier because it was only 2 screws compared to 4 in the older versions. But this is faster, guys. This just keeps everything together. You don't have to mess with the top plate. I mean, they've really thought this out and thought of almost everything. I know I'm blathering on now, but I just can't think of enough to say about this frame. Now, I have actually broken 2 arms. And then when I say broken, I've just barely cracked. So I wanted to leave one on here like this before I swapped it. And this is the place that I have broken both of them in the same exact spot. And it's kind of like, I don't even know if you can see, but there's a little crack right here. Now, and that's because I think these little arm ends act a little bit like little shovels. So every time that I kind of land or I crash, like this in the dirt, I scoop up a lot of dirt in there, and I'm not sure if it's that impact that's causing that. But I would say 2 arms for about 80 packs. So that's one. If that's the average, now I will say that the first break happened around pack 35-40. So yeah, it's averaging about there. I'll update and see if that average continues. Now, to give you an idea of the type of breakages I was having on floss arms, I broke about an arm a quarter. So about every 2.5 to 3 months, I would break an arm with flosses. But as I said, now that I'm going faster, it's hard to really quantify those numbers, because as you go faster, you're going to break things. So if I was running more flosses right now, how many more arms would I break? It's hard to say. But I will say, I don't really run any regular floss 2s anymore. I run all the boomerang arms. And if you break one of those arms, it's $12. So even if, let's say that those numbers held true, even if I broke about 1 arm on a CF1 a month versus 1 every 3 months in a floss, I can buy 4 arms for this for the same price as 1 floss boomerang arm. So you're still coming out ahead as more economical. And I always try to factor those things in. Is it easier to swap components? Is it going to protect your stack? Is it going to protect your other components? So I had been breaking a ton of cameras in my floss 2.1s because, as you can see, the camera is very exposed. And so if I hit a tree, it really wasn't going to break. But I do fly a lot of those quad action gates, and they're very thin and very rigid, so it's really about the width of your finger, probably short, smaller than that. So if you're flying at this angle, boom, that's exactly where it's going to hit. And I found that I was lessening breaking those cameras flying this. In fact, I only broke 1 camera the entire 80 packs I was doing this, and I don't blame the frame. Actually, it was a Runcam Micro Sparrow 2, which the lens is even shorter on that camera. So there was no hit to the camera. The housing just ripped apart. And if you have ever seen that camera, the housing is really, really thin on that. So that's probably the issue there. So do I recommend this? Yes, I do. I've been running the floss, if you've been watching my other videos, for a year. And it's going to be close. I'll let you guys know what I end up doing long term, but I see why so many pilots are switching to this frame. It's just easy. The build time is great. The arm swapping is perfect. And the feel of it in the air, I have to tell you, it just feels great. Whether you like the True X or the Stretch X, both of them feel great. So I would really try one for the price of this. Just do it, guys. Anyway, if there's anything else that I have missed, please let me know. If you liked the intro, leave me a comment. I thought that was kind of a tie-in because of the whole campfire thing. So thanks, guys. Talk to you later.